Welcome to excuse me. Welcome to Monetizing Innovation. I'm John Holcomb. Innovation isn't just the big idea on the whiteboard. It's the hard decisions, the missed signals, and leaders who keep moving forward anyway. This show dives into the real stories behind breakthroughs in life sciences, healthcare, and tech, how ideas become results, and how teams align under pressure, and how strategy turns into execution. If you're building something bold or looking for clarity to lead with confidence, you're in the right place. And today we're very lucky to have a special guest. I think folks are going to be delighted. Neo Queiro,
Queiro.
Queiro, thank you, is such a just inspiring person. She has been in the healthcare industry, veteran, award-winning innovator, author, and co-founder, CEO of the Queiro Group with more than 3 decades of experience spanning revenue cycle management, finance, technology, and leadership development. Neo blends strategic expertise with deep personal insight. After surviving a life-threatening health crisis, she turned her journey into a mission to empower others through coaching, resilience building, and purpose-driven leadership. She's also the author of Joy Notes, Balancing Trauma with Triumph, and a dynamic speaker on transforming adversity into impact. Definitely, we will have all the links in the description for contacting you. And again, just so delighted to have you here with us today.
The pleasure is all mine. It's always good to be able to spend some time and share, especially with entrepreneurs and innovators. We have a lonely road.
Yes, we do. Well, and I think that that's actually a perfect segue. When you look at your journey, you've had to turn adversity into advantage. Especially I think the example you share with some of your books and some of your writings about your personal health journey becoming a catalyst for leadership and impact. How did that experience fundamentally change how you lead and serve others?
So just because you're, listeners may not know what my journey was, but encapsulating it, in 2021, I had 2 cardiac arrests, and I was septic and ended up in ECMO for 24 hours. Then had a major surgery to reconstruct my whole abdomen, which was done by my boss, the CEO of the hospital system that I was
Wow.
working, which is kind of rare that your boss is holding your life in his hands. You wake up from a situation like that after being in an induced coma. And the first thing that came to my mind was, why am I here? Everyone, all the medical officials basically said I should have been dead 3 times. But my body kept going. And then I realized that I'm here for a purpose. And I went on the search to understand what that purpose was. And the purpose came to light 2 months after I actually had the situation that my staff called me and there was a major meeting. We were in that situation. We were bringing in Epic, which is a large health technology, into the hospital system. And they were very nervous. They had no idea how to do it. I was the veteran that did it 5 times before, but I was gone.
All right.
So those leadership decisions were missing to an extent. So there I was with multiple tubes coming off my body, um, literally on crutches and with feeding tubes and breathing tube, um, just supportive tubes that I had. And I went to the meeting. And as I was in the meeting, I observed the room and I realized that I was there for my team. I wasn't there for me. And I was there to help them, elevate them, and elevate my leaders so that they felt strong enough that they could handle the work even though I wasn't really there. And that's all I was doing. I was basically rah rah sis boom bah. You can make this decision. You're the capable one. You know this information. But as I was doing that, elevating other leaders, and I knew that was my purpose, and that started my journey. I also found something else out, that when you have trauma and you're in corporate America, you become a deficit. And all of a sudden, the other senior leaders, I was an SVP, so I was with the C-suite and the other SVPs, they did everything to stay away from me. They did everything to devalue me because I got sick. And that's when I understood that we have been fed a really bad story and script about leadership. And we have to do better. So that was what unfolded, what I do today. And it's a very self-architected, human-centered leadership approach that looks at the whole person and allows people to be fully present instead of performing in the workplace.
I think that's so powerful too, right? Because I think many leaders can definitely, your words resonate, right? Especially with a health crisis or anything. I'd experienced that before myself, and it's a very difficult experience to explain if you haven't lived it.
Mm-hmm.
And how inspiring though that I think you've taken that though and are applying that to your purpose-driven leadership.
You know,
Mm.
but what I did learn, it's not only my health crisis. We all have a story.
Mhm.
And I like to, give people credit for, as we're getting older, our parents are also getting older. And sometimes your crisis is taking care of your parents. Sometimes your crisis is taking care of a child. Sometimes your crisis is a messy divorce, or a death in the family. Those crises are real, they're personal, but they impact your business, life, and relationship. And corporate has no room for them. They just have no room. So we have to know how to present ourselves in the midst of this crisis. And that's why I work a lot with leaders, is letting them understand you could be your whole self and still perform in the corporate arena and be
And
successful at it.
absolutely. And your insight there, I think, is hugely helpful for folks. You often speak about aligning, purpose with performance. What does it look like in practice for leaders operating and especially some of these high pressure environments, and like you said, dealing with some of these messy things in life?
Yeah, I'm a storyteller, so I'm going to give another story. I remember going to, and I know that everybody is getting ready for the end of the year review um, meeting that is done with all the executive leaders, usually in January. And, we all show up and we have the script of our accomplishments. We have the script of our forecast for 2026 and just get a chance to share our team and talk about everything that was done in 2025. I remember having that experience and going in and being extremely excited about the fact that my team had gotten most engagement of employees. Leaders were viewed as the highest operating leaders, and the staff loved them. We had the best numbers in the health system. We also had the best metrics in the health system, and we were killing it. And I remember getting all dressed up, going to the meeting, sitting at my table, dying for my name to be called to go on stage and basically tell our story. And I went on stage when my name was called, And I told the story very much as a finance person, with my finance jargon, with my metrics, and really talking about how we were so lucky to have done everything we did because that fueled the organization to be able to do what they do from the clinical side. I really didn't say it. I just talked numbers. You see, that is performance speak. That is not being present. Being present is when you take yourself and you start thinking about what is that other person going to really need to digest your value. How do you really fit in? Well, you fit in when you talk impact. Mm. If I would have, by the way, my talk failed miserably. After I finished, I got a few faint claps. The CEO said, anybody has questions? I looked around, nobody had questions because they didn't understand a word I was talking about anyway. And, I went to my seat with my tail between my legs. But imagine if I would have gone there and I would have said, we supported the health system. The impact that our group did was able to help this department move forward in this way. We are partners. And now I am a contributor and I am a partner and I am focusing on impact across the organization. And I'm presenting as who I am, a servant leader, instead of presenting as a performer. That's the difference. In the midst of your crisis, remember connection starts everything, and it can help you through that gap. Because if you're connecting and you're talking impact, then people give you grace that you never would have if you're just a performer. Performers do not get major um, promotions. They don't even get major bonuses. Why? Because they're there basically to keep the operation going and they're silent in the view of leaders. But someone with presence, someone that's bringing impact, that person's recognized. That person's going to grow. And that person's given the grace to go through their trauma successfully.
Yeah, that is so powerful because I couldn't agree with you more in that presence, and it's sort of the connecting the dots, right, for folks because you are present and you're showing your real self. Like
Exactly.
I love that story. That's fantastic.
Thank you.
When you look at some of the complex systems that you've had to deal with in healthcare as well, there's constant disruption. You've already talked about some of those like challenges that can approach burnout and things like that. What are some of those practical habits or mindset shifts you believe that make the biggest difference? And I know you just talked about being present is definitely probably the starting point there, but what are some of the other things that are also critical to sustaining that resilience?
Mm-hmm. It's really interesting because generations handle it differently. Mm-hmm. If you look at the boomers, things happen to them, and just because of the way they grew up, they just keep going. They don't even acknowledge the drama that's in their life. It runs through them, and they just keep going because they have to go to the goal. Then you have Gen Z, X, and Gen X is in a situation that they have a boomer mentality, but they also do have an empathy mentality. And they are seeking ways to self-regulate. Not as deep as a millennial who starts with self-regulation, which starts with empathy. And then the Gen Zs, their mentality is this is a job. I am here to perform a service, and I'm doing it from 8 to 5 or 6, and then I have a life. So I am going to perform and I am going to scale to the problem, but I am not going to own it and take it home with me because I got a life. I'm so proud of them.
Yeah,
From a
absolutely.
mental state, they are the healthiest mental state, right? To a degree. They have anxiety and a bunch of other stuff. But so when we look at all that, we have to understand that each generation is going to handle it different. But what we do know is music goes across all generations. That's why my book is called Joy Notes. And what I like to teach my leaders is to lean into music because music will actually power you. See, frequency of music is a very powerful thing that will regulate you down when you're stressed. In 7 minutes, you can actually take someone from anxiety and a PTSD episode into calm. But music in another frequency, in 120 to 150 megahertz, will immediately give you performance and will give you the strength to. So, listening to music intently, understanding the right frequency is the universal way that we can self-regulate and empower ourselves. Now, not everybody knows about the power of music, but what I like to say is seek out what is it that you love, that you can take a pause and do for a few minutes to get yourself back to self, back to being, whatever it is. Some people will turn on some music and move, and movement is their thing. Other people will just breathe. When they breathe, they feel calm, they are able to handle that. There's some other people, my brother, my oldest brother, would draw. No matter what document he had, there was a drawing on the document. But that brought him down. That regulated him. Whatever it is, take a minute and take a few minutes and give yourself the grace to regulate yourself. Because reality is you have a choice. And if you start with knowing that you have a choice, there's nothing you can't do.
That is so powerful. And I think it resonates right on so many levels that, especially for leaders, it's easy to get caught up in that moment, right? It's easy not to be your best self. And to your point, being able to use some of these things, like you do have a choice and you do have a choice to regulate, which is that self grace. And really love that analogy. I like the whole concept of your book too, with joy notes. I think that's fantastic.
And the thing is, only you can make the decision to react. You know, most of the times when we react with anger is because we're fearful of the situation. And when we react with anger is because we're leaning into our feelings and not leaning into really diagnosing the situation. So imagine if before we ever react, we enter it with curiosity and listen to the whole situation instead of the first word or the first three words. We would be totally different people.
Absolutely. It completely changes your lens on the situation, right? Because you are going in with a learning mindset.
Yep, absolutely.
That's fantastic. One of the things I've definitely seen with some of your work too, which is so impressive as well, as the innovation with heart. And when I look at some of the things of the transformations you've led across revenue cycle, finance, and technology, um, and we started to talk about that balance, right, of empathy and accountability. But how do you balance that with also the innovation and not sacrifice results and do some of that? Do you have any stories you could share on that as well?
Yeah. So, I really started working with AI 8 years ago. Everybody talks about it's new. There's nothing new about AI. And I'm not talking about automation. Automation, I think I've been working with automation for over 25 years. Um, and different steps in the automation journey as technology has developed. But one of the things 8 years ago that I realized as we were doing digital transformation, the only way it was going to be adopted if it was human centered. And that meant that the innovation had to have in mind the human reaction to the innovation. When I was at Tufts Medicine, I received the award from Modern Healthcare as a top 25 innovator for 2021. And that occurred during the pandemic. We had lines that just were ridiculous of people trying to get tested or trying to get
Right.
the vaccine. And it was hot and it was Boston. Can you imagine? Like a petri dish. And I walked in and I see these little elderly people, some fainted, some dehydrated. And not only did we immediately start giving water, and we brought these incredible fans that also misted everyone, but we had to put together a technology that could take this process of the wait time was an hour and a half, and we brought it down to a altogether 13 minutes from the time they showed up to the time they got their test or they got their vaccination. And as time went on, we did get to 7 minutes. But the first goal was getting to 13, and we did. And that happened because we really mapped out the reaction, not only of the servant staff that was doing
Right.
the service. We want to make sure that they were happy, that it made sense how they were navigating, and that the technology supported them. But we also had to make sure that it supported those that were using it and waiting in that line. And that is what human-centered innovation is about. It's understanding that anything you build has to have the human element and has to be able to create critical thinking and critical action. So that's really what I've been able to do working with so many companies and also healthcare systems in developing use cases that don't become just technology, but also become adoptive technology, that people keep it, that it's active and it works beyond the day that someone had the ideation of this could make life better.
No, I think that is such a wonderful example, and had so many wonderful points in there too. Yeah, innovation for innovation's sake, right? Is it's not beneficial. That's just it's a great idea. But I love the kind of that simple example but powerful example, right? Of thinking about both the service folks as well as the folks in line. And I mean, I remember personally during the COVID times, absolutely. I mean, some of the wait times were crazy in that beginning, just the sheer number, right, of people
Mhm.
that were trying to get vaccinated and the work that you were able to do with the team there. I think that's just a great example that a lot of folks can relate to.
Yeah, absolutely. And it's funny, I was at Becker's a few months ago, and I was on a
Mhm.
panel and we were talking about innovation and the success of the use case, how to make it successful.
Mhm.
And, at the time I was representing a small community hospital out of Nashville, and I was anchored by two mammoth organizations. It was like these huge mountains and then little bitty. And they were talking about, we're doing this use case, you're doing that use case. And I said, "So how's the adoption going?" Yeah, our first time, we kind of failed
Yeah.
on adoption. The nurses didn't want to use it. And I said, were they involved in the creation? Um, Not really. The second time, yes. And that's the whole problem. Innovation in AI is a enabler.
Mhm.
It is there to make our life easier. It is not there to replace us. So even when you are using it to finish some tasks that maybe a human used to do, at some point it's going to hand off to a human. That human has to have a general stake in knowing how it works when it hits them. What is the expectation? How will they process it best? And then how they hand off to the next place. If they're not involved in that trifecta, then your use case doesn't work because it's not about them and it's not about them being critical thinkers. It's not about them being successful. And that is what the innovation is about, making them successful. You forgot about them.
Exactly.
So you have to make it human-centered because as innovation continues to grow, the human is the power source. Because guess what? We're the creative source. Innovation is never going to surpass us in being creative. It just isn't. And there's so many examples. If you look at how food has been used in the past, um, and the ideas of many different creations of different innovations, they never really align with the initial intent. Humans recreated it, and that's why humans are so special. So we need to understand that if you don't make it human-centered, your use case is going to be flawed, and you will be back and wasting money.
Yeah.
And then guess what? You got to create trust.
Yeah.
After you failed, now you have to create trust. Why not create trust in the beginning? Because you involved the right people in it in the beginning.
Absolutely. It's funny. I like your word choice better because I often refer to it as job theory, right? Really understanding the jobs to be done. But it really, to your point, it's much simpler. It's just human centric. I really, I love those examples because that's one of the biggest mistakes I think we all see with innovation failing is it never involved the folks that actually would buy and use the service or product. Yeah.
Yeah.
Um,
I mean, a perfect example, if you remember when airlines first put kiosks out, they were so non-human friendly,
Absolutely.
right? But they learned really quick. They turned that around. And now ask if you know one person that really has to go, unless they have a travel issue that they want to go somewhere else. 90% of the people use the kiosk because then it became human centric. Then it became easy. It gave you the prompts. It gave you the pictures so
Sure.
you knew how to put your tags on. That's the difference.
No, I completely agree with you. Yeah, it's so fascinating when you look at that. And I look at, like you said, you've been transitioning on this journey from corporate to now entrepreneur. And when you look at longer term, the legacy and impact, what legacy do you hope to leave through your work? And what advice do you give to leaders who want to turn challenges into meaningful impact like you're doing?
My legacy is to really show leaders how to be their own self-curated architects of their leadership
Mhm.
journey. And that's a lot of words. What does that mean? What it means is that you must first know self. And once you know self, then you can apply what works for you and make it your script, one that you are able to adapt and change when you need to because you outgrew what you were doing instead of living in somebody else's leadership script. And if I can help people find that path, it will automatically serve them well with innovation, serve them well with their team culture and their personal, because that's the whole person. And that's my aim. That's my purpose. My purpose is to not only do it in a leadership class, but also do it with technology and business. because you see, if you could be the example when you are in the grind, in the business, in building technology and deploying technology, then people can start seeing the value and they could do it for themselves. So I want to live my purpose and I want to set it up so many others can follow suit and find their perfect self curated architectural leadership style.
I love that so much. You are so inspirational on so many levels, and I really do like that holistic view that you bring because, like, yeah, it's not just innovation, it's not just business. You have to have the whole person. And thank you so much for just such a wonderful conversation today. And I'm really excited for folks to read your book as well. I've just started reading it and I'm already inspired, and I haven't even finished it yet.
Thank
Um,
you.
so I definitely look forward to continuing our discussions, and hopefully we can have many more because you've lived it, you've done it, and you're really helping others, work through the messy challenges of life and leadership. So thank you very much.
Yes, and I just wanted to let people know that in spring 2026, we will be having a new book that it is a true self-architect leadership guide. And we're very excited about that. Um, and yes, you can please join us on my podcast, which is Joy and Gratitude. And John's going to join me on my podcast. So please follow along. And also on LinkedIn, I post every single day wonderful leadership nuggets and also a strong newsletter that will help you in those tough times that you as a leader may feel very alone, but you're never alone. There's lots of us here that are here to help you and support you and elevate you.
Thank you so much. I couldn't say it better. I hope you have a wonderful day, and thank you so much for being on the podcast today. I think our listeners are really going to love it.
Thank you. It's an honor. And yeah.